I can see far away. It's just up close. I can't see without my glasses. All right, so it looks like it is 7 p.m. It is 7 p.m. on June 21st, and I'm going to call to order the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting for the City of Richfield. Welcome, everyone. And first we have open forum. So to participate remotely, you dial 1-415-655-0001, and it's up on the screen if you're watching from home, and you enter the webinar access code of 2456-519-3413. And the password would be 1234. Now I realize there's a slight delay in the broadcast here, so we'll pause for a minute if people are calling in. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak during open forum? All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll just pause for a moment. And for the public that's viewing at home, we're putting in new technology as we are working through all the systems, and I think we now have figured out how to do the call-ins in an efficient manner. So thank you to everybody that worked on that. All right, it does not look like anybody is calling in, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes of the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of May 16th, 2022.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Vries-Daniels and seconded by Commissioner Onesorg to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We've approved the minutes. Next, we'll move on to approval of the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And we've all opposed? We've approved the agenda. All right. Our first item of business is consideration of a resolution awarding up to $200,000 in funding from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to MWF Properties for the development of 55 units of affordable multifamily housing at 7700 Pillsbury Avenue South. Executive Director Palman.
Thank you, Chair Supple. I will turn it over to Assistant Community Development Director Julie Urban.
Thank you, Chair Supple, members of the HRA. MWF Properties, the developer, has received approvals to construct 55 units of multifamily housing on HRA-owned property located at 7700 Pillsbury Avenue South. The HRA approved a contract for private development with the developer in December of 2021 to provide 48 units affordable at 60% of the area median income, 5 units affordable at 50%, and 2 units for people with disabilities affordable at 30% of the area median income. The HRA also agreed to provide $881,848 in tax increment financing to support the project. The developer planned to apply for tax-exempt bonds and 4% tax credits in January to finance the project. However, insufficient funds were available. Facing rising construction costs, the developer has decided to apply for 9% tax credits for the project from Minnesota Housing. The 9% tax credits will provide significant additional equity to the project that will cover the increased construction costs and enable the project to offer deeper affordability than was originally proposed. The developer is also planning to make additional energy efficiency improvements to the building. The developer is proposing to provide the following level of affordability under this proposal: 6 units affordable at 30% of the area median income, 19 units affordable at 50% of the AMI, 18 units affordable at 60%, 7 housing support units for people who have experienced homelessness, affordable at 30% of the AMI, and 5 units for people with disabilities, also affordable at 30% of the AMI. The number of 3-bedroom units will be reduced from 15 to 9, but 5 4-bedroom units will be added. The energy efficiency level the project will seek to obtain is the B3 Sustainable Building 2030 Energy Standard, or SB 2030. And this standard includes a combination of on-site renewable energy generation and energy efficiency improvements. To help fund the project revisions, the developer is seeking an additional $200,000 from the HRA's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The additional funds will help the developer to provide the increased affordability as well as the energy efficiency improvements, which will make the project more likely to receive tax credits. The application for 9% tax credits is due on July 14th. And the developer is asking for this commitment of additional financial assistance to include in that application in order to increase the project's score and provide a better opportunity for the project to be funded. Following, given the short timeline, we don't have the actual contract amendment in front of you, but we would say that following approval of this resolution, the HRA attorney would prepare a formal amendment to the contract. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. The developer is also here tonight to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions? I actually had a couple. So it talks about the supportive housing. Could the developer talk about what that would involve? Is there going to be staff on site, or what does that mean?
Brian Schwickert, 3251 Louisiana Avenue South, St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. The housing support, is it housing support specifically you were asking about? Mm-hmm. So through the Minnesota Housing RFP, you can include a set aside for some units that are designated as high priority homeless or persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities units are utilizing Section 811, so subsidy through Department of Human Services, and the housing support is covering the 7 high-priority homeless units. Now, what that entails is the state designates high-priority homeless units as individuals who are not necessarily living on the streets, but just don't have a permanent and stable housing environment. They're couch surfing, they're bouncing from place to place. And the state has something called coordinated entry, which is a database that people can register and filter through, and I think kind of a central area to find housing. So we source a lot of the tenants for the high priority homeless units through coordinated entry, and we work with a service provider. The service provider we work with is a local service provider called Reentry House. They're a service provider on 2 of our other projects in this area. They provide services for the individuals. They will work with the individuals to get a job, work with the individual to create a budget, go out and help them purchase different household needs, toothpaste, toilet paper, help them pay their utilities, and they basically meet with them 2 to 3 hours a week, specifically with those individuals, to basically help them get back on their feet. A lot of high priority homeless individuals have chemical dependency or mental health issues, and that's usually a reason why they're homeless in the first place. And Reentry House will work with those individuals to help them with anything they need, and help them get back on their feet, and hopefully get a job and someday move out and pay for rent. So it's a really cool program, and Minnesota, the state of Minnesota has a subsidy called housing. It used to be GRA, Group Residential Housing. It's since transitioned about 5 years ago to a program called Housing Support, state-funded subsidy that ultimately has an unlimited budget, really. And if you are a service provider that provides housing support, the housing support gets administered through the county. Hennepin County would receive the funding and then provide it to our project. And there's 2 types of housing support. The first rate 1 housing support helps subsidize the income or the rent, and the second rate 2, help subsidize services. So essentially, we utilize that housing support to both A, help pay rent, so the tenant is only paying 30% of their income, but if they don't have an income, it's nothing, and housing support covers the whole rent, kind of like Section 8. And then rate 2 helps cover the services, so that amount gets paid a flat amount to reentry house per individual per month, and that goes to cover their services. So reentry house is not actually on site, they're actually headquartered, I think in Richfield, maybe it's Minneapolis, just up Glendale. And they will just provide someone on site 2 to 3 hours a week per individual, so 7 individuals, that's 35. I think how many hours that'd be, 18 hours a week. And we have designated areas, community room, or not community room. We used to have second offices, but we found that it's better for them to work with the individuals in their own household instead of a community area, because they feel more comfortable in there. So a lot of times they'll come and meet with them in there. So that's the best I can describe housing support in the high priority homes.
That was very helpful, thank you. As a follow-up to that, is it only for individuals, or I know when I used to be a teacher, there would be families, entire families who would be homeless or living out of a car. Could the service be provided to an adult in that situation who has a family?
Yeah, that's a good question. So through coordinated entry, each county comes up with a target population that they deem is most critical need of high priority homeless household that needs housing. Hennepin County's top priority is singles. There are counties out there that have families as a top priority, but since singles is the priority, we try to focus on that in our tenant selection plan, and when we get referrals for coordinated entry. So being singles is the priority. Doesn't make much sense to have 2-bedroom units for a single person. Set aside the 1-bedroom units, but there are counties that have families. There are, we don't have to target the first priority, but that's a Minnesota housing goal, and that's what we've done, I guess, for all the projects. So the answer is yes, we can, but for this project,
All right, thank you, that's helpful. And then I had 2 other questions. With the energy standards, you said it was about renewable. Is that like geothermal or solar, or what type of renewable?
good question. So for Minnesota housing, for these 9% tax credits, we already have to adhere to the green community standards. I don't know how familiar you are with those. We have to incorporate at least 2 times the optional points that are required for that. Then there's a Minnesota overlay, that additional sustainability requirement. So that is something we're already doing. In addition to that, there's through E3, SB 2030. Basically what that is, we work with a group for a lot of our projects. It's Wilden, development group, I think, or Wilden, but basically they will take our plans, and the goal is to reduce energy consumption below a certain threshold. And there's a huge model, and a huge baseline from 2003, 2030. They're trying to get it essentially net zero. And depending on the year we're in, there's a certain threshold where, compared to the baseline in 2003, they're trying to get our energy savings below a certain threshold. So there's multiple ways you can do that. You can get more efficient, mechanical equipment. You can use solar panels. You can do probably geothermal. There's a number of things, and what Wilden will do is put together a packet and say, in order to hit the threshold, these are different options to incorporate. So we need our plans put together. They need to review the plans for them to come up with that. Work with, name's Pat, the U of M, but I can't remember his department. They're the ones who ultimately review, approve, and so it's not a specific thing we do. We just it's just making the building itself more sustainable, energy efficient, much more than proposed, much more.
Okay, thank you. And then my final question, what safeguards are in place to ensure that all the workers, the contracted workers, the subcontracted workers, they're all paid and that all the labor laws are followed? Because like you as the developer are the umbrella, so how are you going to take care of your contractors and subcontractors to make sure they're following all the labor
Yeah, that's a good
regulations?
question. I know this came up in a previous meeting we were at with City Council, and we condemn worker exploitation. We don't. We support the protection of workers' rights. And our subcontractor, Eagle, who is based here in Richfield, They have a subcontract compliance program in place to prevent worker abuses on Eagle projects and to identify and address problems if they occur. And, we're confident Eagle is going to take those steps and make sure that subcontractors aren't exploiting their workers. And if we receive any evidence that shows that subcontractor workers are being exploited, we won't allow that subcontractor to be on our job, but there needs to be evidence, and it needs to be shown that there is exploitation occurring. So, Eagle is the one who ultimately hires and works with the subcontractor, but us as the owner and developer, it's our job to make sure that that's happening, and we'll do our best to make sure that's not happening. We find out it is. Take drastic measures.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? All right. So I'm going to move that we adopt a resolution approving an amendment to the contract for private development with MWF Properties, awarding up to $200,000 for affordability and energy efficiency improvements, and authorizing the chair and executive director to execute the agreement. Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and then I had an amendment, and so I believe what we do is I make the amendment, and then we discuss it and just vote up or down on the amendment, and then we go back to the main motion, either amended or original. So that's the parliamentary procedure we're going to be following here. So then I would move to further amend the contract for private development to add the following language. Prior to the issuance of the certificate of completion, the developer must provide the authority with evidence satisfactory to the authority representative that all contractors, subcontractors, and project laborers have been paid.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, so discussion about this?
I'm curious at, the addition and why we feel it's necessary to add would be kind of my first question. And then my second question would be, what is the evidence that would be satisfactory to us?
All right, well, I can answer the first question because back in September of 2020, we had a lot of discussion and work sessions about a prevailing wage ordinance, and there were also additional things that were going to be done and put into development agreements to make sure we were doing worker protections. And so some of those things are like the ones that are in here, like if somebody is not following a labor law, then that puts them in, I'm trying to remember what the word is for it, but basically
Default.
it puts them into default. So if they're in default because they're not following the laws, then the TIF money doesn't get forwarded. So it adds a way to kind of put some compliance in there. And so the first agreement with MWF was before this whole conversation happened. And then that agreement expired. And then in December of 2021, they brought back, but I think they used some of the original language, so a lot of that discussion about the labor stuff wasn't in there. So some of it's there and some of it isn't. And so I was looking to try and make sure that we're consistent in our agreements.
So this isn't specific to this project. You just want to make sure that it is aligned with all the rest of the projects that we have approved. This language should be in all projects.
Because, yes, it's in the next agenda item, it's in that one.
Okay.
And it's in a previous one, but I think this, kind of because of the agreement expiring and then starting again, that was what I was looking for, was consistency. Then there was some discussion with Executive Director Palman about the compliance part, so I can let her speak to that.
Yes, thank you, Chair Supple. So we did talk this over with HRA attorney Julie Eddington, who initially put this language into the first contract where we used this, which was the enclave development. And Julie's take on it is that the events of default probably does cover us. It requires compliance with all labor laws. It allows us to withhold the TIF if there's evidence that a developer has not, or a contractor or builder has not. That said, if we'd like to leave this in or be consistent and add it just to kind of bring it home that this is very important to us, she suggested that the way that we would monitor this is perhaps a signed document by the developer certifying that they have checked the records and are certain that all workers on the job have been paid, as opposed to some more involved compliance checking.
Did that answer the questions you had?
Yes, I would say I'm supportive of it, as I just wanted to make sure that we were applying this to all and we weren't just particularly picking on this particular development, but it sounds like this is just to make it in compliance with everything else, so I'm supportive of
Because
it.
it struck me when I went to the next agenda item, and I'm like, why is one have it this way and one have it the other way?
Yeah,
And so then I started going back and looking through things and asking questions. So there's a consistency factor to it. But the compliance thing is, I hadn't thought about that, so I was glad that there was a way to do it that worked for everybody. Did you have any other questions? All right, so first we have to vote on the amendment. So if there's no further discussion on the amendment, all in favor of just making the amendment? And before we vote, so basically that would just add that language to the agreement, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so all in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, so we've passed the amendment. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. And is there a discussion or are there questions about that? All right, go ahead.
No questions. I just want to say I, have been supportive of this project, and I think with the rising construction costs, the additional money is, again, we've been providing this to other developers lately, and so I'm excited to see the additional affordability and the larger bedroom sizes being added. So I don't have any further questions, but I just want to say I'm happy that we're making these changes.
Yeah, I'll second that with the larger units and the affordability of it. I was really happy to see that.
And I guess I would third that the changes that were made, like to add the larger units and making sure we're adding all of those other things, are really important. Are there any questions? All right, so we have the main motion as amended. Do I need to repeat it right now, or? Staff, do I need to repeat what the motion is, or are we all clear on what we're?
I think it's clear what the motion is. It was motioned and seconded.
Okay, so we are now voting on the main motion as amended. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, next we are going to move on to consideration of the adoption of a resolution approving a contract for private development with 101 East 66th Street LLC and authorizing the issuance of a tax increment limited revenue note related to the construction of an 80-unit mixed-use project at 101 66th Street. Executive Director Palman.
Thank you, Chair Supple, members of the board. The property at 101 66th Street East was first vacated in 2013. After 3 years of neglect, it was purchased for redevelopment by PLH and Associates in 2016. After many years of work, the city approved plans for a 42-unit mixed-use building in October of 2020. And the Housing and Redevelopment Authority approved a contract with them to provide assistance in the form of tax increment in January of 2021. Shortly thereafter, PLH sold the property to 101 East 66th Street LLC, the current developer. In June of 2021, the developer presented new plans for the redevelopment of the site, and on January 11th of this year, the council approved site plans for an 80-unit, 5-story mixed-use building. HRA Financial Consultants Ehlers has reviewed the project finances, and as was the case with the previous proposal, there is a substantial financial gap that must be filled in order to redevelop the blighted site. HRA staff has worked with HRA legal counsel and the developer to negotiate a contract. Among the provisions of the contract are the developer will make improvements totaling at least approximately $18 million to include construction of a new 5-story mixed-use building with approximately 80 apartment units and 2,700 square feet of ground floor commercial space. The developer will pay and/or reimburse the HRA's upfront costs for creation of the contract and other administrative costs. A minimum of 20% of the units in the building, which is 16 units, will be reserved for households earning 60% or less of the area median income for the life of the tax increment district, which is projected to be 16 years as well. Affordable units will be distributed proportionally among the various unit types. In addition, the city and HRA's inclusionary housing policy requires at least 3 Type A units that include roll-in showers and grab bars, or at least 2 units that are ADA accessible. The HRA will withhold the first 10% of tax increment for reimbursement of its ongoing administrative costs throughout the life of the district, and the maximum TIF that would be available to the developer is $2.3 million. Staff and the HRA's financial advisor have concluded that the development could not occur but for this level of assistance. And as a reminder, especially for those at home, in a TIF district, the property owner continues to pay the taxes on the pre-redevelopment property values to all of the taxing jurisdictions. That includes the city, the county, and the school district. The property owner also pays the normal property taxes on the value of the new construction. Those new taxes are the increment, and those can be returned to the developer to reimburse them for costs necessary to make the project financially feasible. In a redevelopment TIF district like this one, there are no statutory requirements related to affordability. The city or the HRA's policy states that rental housing developments that receive financial assistance will either reserve 20% of the units for households earning 60% of AMI or contribute 15% of the available tax increment to the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Fund. I will note that we did try really hard to lower the affordability in this project, but the rising construction and labor costs have made that very difficult, and we weren't able to get those numbers to work. Finally, the TIF that would be provided would be in the form of a pay-as-you-go note, so that would not pose a financial risk to the HRA. Those taxes are paid as they are generated or reimbursed to the developer as they are generated. So there's no financial risk on the HRA's side. Due to the holiday, the developer had a little bit of confusion in which date this meeting was, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you might have about the contract.
Yeah, I had one question here is, which choice did they choose for the accessible units? Was it the...
You know, I actually do not know the answer to that, but I can follow up with you. I don't remember if they have actually made that choice yet.
Okay, I didn't find it anywhere, so I was a little confused. Thanks.
I can follow up with you.
To follow up on that, is an ADA accessible unit is it ready to be accessible or is it already accessible?
It would be already accessible. So that would include the countertops, and Julie Urban is our expert on this, but it would include the counters and the space to roll under in your space. It would remove those cabinets. It's wider, access aisles.
So both Type A and fully accessible would have the wider doorways, and it takes it a step further to get to the accessible. With the Riley building, they're Type A units, but they all have roll-in showers. They both. There's just 2 units in that one, but
Okay.
yep.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just like going through the timeline and trying to follow. We approved the contract for private development for what this would be and what this would look like, right? But now the new developer, are their plans exactly the same? Did they pick up the exact same plans? I don't see them in our packet. I don't know if we normally see them in our packet.
All right, Commissioner Vries Daniels.
Yeah.
No, we don't normally provide the plans in the packet. And no, these are not the same plans. The previous plans that you approved a contract for was for a 42-unit building, a 3-story 42-unit building. And that you did approve the contract. It was never executed. So it was not filed. The TIF district has been created and certified, so it is there. And now our time clock has started ticking. Development needs to get in the ground. But this is a completely new contract for a completely new project with basically double the number of units that was previously approved.
And will this go back through like the planning commission?
It
All the
already
normal.
has.
Okay.
The council and planning commission have seen this. There has been a public hearing that the council, or I'm sorry, the project is fully entitled in that respect.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to that question with the TIF, how, I know on one of the other items, you talked about that there's like 5 years to get started. So we're in that 5-year window right now.
That's correct.
And so that started in January of 2021?
I believe it's certified in February, but yes.
Okay. And then I was planning to ask the developer about the labor safeguards that I asked the last group, but since they're not here, you can tell us though in the contract for private development, both of those standards are in there to protect the workers?
Yes, that's correct. This language has both the language in the certificate of completion section and also in the events of default.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions? All right, then we need someone to make the motion.
I will move that we approve a resolution approving for a contract for private development with 101 East 66th Street LLC and authorizing the issuance of a tax increment limited revenue note.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the merits of the proposal?
No.
All right. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, we've approved the resolution. Thank you. Next, we're going to move to the HRA discussion items. And one of them that we asked for on our last meeting was a discussion of the Richfield Rediscovered program. So Executive Director Paleman, did you want to say something before we got into this discussion to kind of set the table, or?
Sure, Supple. Yes, I think that perhaps Julie and I will present kind of a summary of the memo that was provided to you as part of your packet to start off the discussion. And as a reminder for those watching, prior to the last meeting on which we had an item to consider related to the Richfield Rediscovered program, Councilmember Whalen submitted some comments asking the HRA to discontinue this program. So in response, we've worked to put together kind of a holistic look at the HRA's housing programs, how they're financed, and how this fits into that larger puzzle. Councilmember Hayford O'Leary also submitted some comments, and so I think that the memo responded to those comments, and then we will present our recommendation to you. Julie?
Chair Supple, members of the HRA, there's a lot of information in the memo. I'm going to try not to just read it to you, since hopefully you read it yourself. But I would just want to point out some things. Like, I think a background for those of you who may or may not know, this program goes way back to 1990. And the story I was told is that some staff and some others sat in a Richfield house with some realtors and others just to say, you know, we are looking to stem the tide of families who leave our community when their kids get too big for Richfield homes. We want to tear down some substandard homes and build new. What do you think? And the answer is, you will never sell a market rate house brand new in Richfield. It'll never work, right? And anyway, 100 and some properties later, you know, it obviously worked, right? And just a reminder of what the goals were at the time. So trying to stem that tide, the schools were hemorrhaging children, right? We just were losing population. And so we were looking to attain and attract and retain growing families to the community by constructing larger and higher valued homes with features that families were looking for. And we wanted to increase the tax base, and then we wanted to remove substandard homes. And then later on, we added another goal to try to do some opportunities for empty nester housing, so single level living townhome type projects. That's just been a much smaller part of the project, but the HRA had been doing this since 1974, some of this purchase of substandard homes that were they were always affordable through our new home program. But this was giving us an opportunity to kind of pick up the pace of that, and then also just to provide a wider range and to help diversify our housing stock is really been a goal of the community for a long time. So just since 1991, I guess, we've done 151 homes under the program, and market rate homes under RR. And at the same time, we've continued to do affordable homes under the new home program. So we did 44 of those. And I think there was a comment made that it's just 1-for-1 replacement, but we did take a look at the numbers, and we've had a net gain of 39 homes. And we've done that through double lots and some other opportunities. So looking at the big picture, we included a chart. I think some of you years ago were at League of Women Voters, where we first brought that chart out to just sort of show you the scope of what we do. The HRA has always been about providing kind of a range, stuff at all ends for both homeowners, renters, and different ranges of income. And so that chart, I think, is helpful. And then I added in there just sort of the source of funding. We use a variety of funding sources to make this happen. RR, is again a part of that. It's at the market rate end, but it doesn't mean that we aren't doing other things relating to affordability and other things. And as you know, another way that we are working to create larger homes is through the Transformation Loan Program and encouraging folks to do large-scale remodel. We believe that RR remains an important part of that big picture. I think the comment was made also by someone is that, well, prices have been rising, so we have higher valued homes, but those are higher valued, the same Richfield homes that are smaller and maybe don't have these features that people are maybe looking for, and don't give us quite the diversity of the housing stock that I think we still can work towards. We looked a little bit at the cost of the program, and I just looked at the past 10 years, and the RR homes, they've had an average subsidy of around $41,000 per house, whereas the new home program has a quite a bit higher subsidy of about $75,000 per house. And then you can see there's quite a range, especially in the new home program. Lots of things can make that vary. The source of funding, it's primarily been through the Housing and Redevelopment Fund, which is our pooled TIF. And as we've talked about, there's some restrictions on that pooled TIF and it has to be used to alleviate substandardness. We now, as you also know, have special legislation that's going to allow us to transfer some of that money into our trust fund to free that up a little bit and use it specifically for affordable housing. That's not going to tap all of that, but it will certainly provide us a large chunk of money that we can choose to use towards affordable housing. And I would say that over the past 5 years, we've definitely shifted to more efforts in the affordable end than we have on the market rate end of things. In terms of what's happening right now, given the market and the high prices, the program has kind of naturally slowed. We haven't had nearly the opportunities to purchase substandard homes, and plus we've done a good job of taking care of a lot of those smaller former hunting, fishing cabins and little back of the lot houses that really weren't meant to be long-term housing, and we've picked up quite a few of those, right? So there's not a lot left on the market. And just given the cost, we can't afford most of what's out there. So it's naturally slowed. And really what we have done is kind of focused our efforts, and we look to buy problem properties that we often get referred to by our code enforcement staff or through the tax forfeiture program. And so it's serving a lot of needs when we purchase a property like that. It's helping the neighborhood that's maybe suffered from the blighted conditions and what might be going on in that property. And then also just there's still some folks out there that do seek us out and maybe looking. This was back in December. We purchased one of those homes, an elderly woman who just she wanted to sell to us. It was just better for her to make it simple and easy and sell to us. And she was willing to do that at a slightly less than she would have received on the market just because of the peace of mind that we were able to give her. So those are the properties we focus on. We aren't out there actively seeking properties anymore. And as you know, we also have the credit program, which we received an application for last month, and that too is somewhat rare these days that we receive that application. So one of the other things mentioned was just that we have these rehab programs, but those don't get at these blighted properties, and we feel as staff it's important to still have some resources and some avenues for dealing with those properties. And we could in theory do them all as affordable, but there isn't a lot of capacity to do that. Because there is a larger subsidy involved, we do look for permanent affordability. We don't want to just help the first buyer. That would be a lot of money for one buyer. So we want it to be permanent. So that means a land trust or Habitat for Humanity, which will buy back a house if somebody sells and then resell it. And so those are kind of rarer, and it's just more challenging. And we would have to put quite a few more resources, I think, to try to expand that option. So we just feel that it gives us more flexibility if we can also do some of those lots as market rate. I think I've probably covered. Then the other piece about right now, what we're doing, and we've been doing this informally, is using the program to encourage some of our other goals. For example, accessory dwelling units and energy efficiency, and then potentially coming up duplexes. So the RR program gives us an opportunity to practice some of those models and try to show the private market how they can work. And that involves some financial commitment from the HRA, but we feel like that's what our role is, right? Is to step in where the market, either where the market doesn't or the market's going to do a poor job of it. So we want to show the right way to do it. And again, there's quite a bit of cost upfront to try some of those models, and to also add affordability onto that just makes it a pretty big investment. And that's not to say we won't do that. We certainly talk to Habitat about that every time we work with them. But again, looking for some flexibility so that we have the opportunity to create a duplex, even if we can't make it affordable. It furthers another goal of the community. So in terms of our recommendation, what we would do is suggest that you formalize these things that we've been doing informally, and that would be to focus our acquisition efforts on either problem properties, or in the case where someone comes to us and is willing to accept less. And then to, let's see, what else? Sorry, I lost my place. Then we would, again, ask for you to continue to budget some funds for the Richfield Rediscovered program. And at this point, we would recommend that we limit that to one purchase per year as well as one credit. And then finally, we would add formally to both the lot sale program and the credit program that the new house must also meet another goal of the HRA. And we could, that may vary as time goes. Maybe in a certain lot, we think that's a great candidate for a duplex, or maybe we give them the choice of an accessory dwelling unit or something super energy efficient. And then there may be other goals that develop over time that we can also use the program to further. So that would be what our recommendation is, and I also offer a couple of other options that you can certainly take a look at. At that, we can answer any questions, or if Melissa has any. Did I miss anything we want to add?
I don't think so. I think Julie did a great job of summarizing. I just wanted to add, which I think she covered, but we consider this part of a whole. The HRA has a big role in the community, and that role is varied, and we're trying to meet the needs of a varied population. And we believe that this program is part of that and helps us to achieve some of those goals. But obviously it is up to the board. It is your decision. And we can make any changes that you would look for looking at our 2023 budget, which we are working on now.
All right, so this is not something that we're going to vote on. It's a discussion item. So are there thoughts that any of you have?
Yeah, I was just wondering, when it says a certain amount's going to be allocated to affordable housing trust, how much is that, or how does that play out?
So I know it's like the teaser we've been giving you for a year, and we are waiting for the audit it's quite late this year because of the upheaval in the finance department. So we're waiting for that final number, and then I think they also authorized, Ellers is working on a sort of a big picture of our TIF. And through those two things, we're going to get a number, and it's going to be an annual amount. It's a significant amount of money. So, and we've got it through 2025, so it's going to be it'll be basically 4 years worth of funds every year. That's going to be, we're talking millions that could potentially be available.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add, we will be looking to the board to help us to prioritize that funding. And so we're hoping to come to you once we have that number with kind of a comprehensive look at the projects that are on the horizon and how we would like to allocate that money.
All right, Commissioner Breeze Daniels?
Yeah, first I just want to say thank you, Steph, for like the detailed notes in our packet. It was very, very helpful as I kind of went through this. There are parts of this program that I love. There are parts of this program that I don't love. And so I love that we are having the conversation to say, where do we want to go into the future? So this is just going to be my random thoughts, not tied together. So I apologize for that. But when I think about all these programs like Richfield Rediscovered and Transformation Home Loan, right, which is separate than this, I do love that I always say like the HRA helps with housing in all levels, right? So it's not just affordable housing, it's all of the different diversity of housing stock, which I really appreciate. But I think what I would love for us to talk about is when we talk about diversity of housing stock, like how do we keep track of this and how do we know we've met our goals, right? Like how do we know, to your point, that we have, housing values have gone up, but that doesn't mean it's family housing, right? And how do we keep track of that and say, I feel like we have no idea right now how much we have of anything and really define what those goals are. And so we can track towards, yes, we're meeting this. No, we're not. This is the program that meets that. This is the program that meets this, and kind of coming all together. I know we do a year in review, but I don't feel like I have a great handle on kind of all of those things of when we know we're good at part of this. I have always, I think, voted against because I really don't like when we buy up what I would consider affordable housing. I get it goes through like blighted standards, but I think that's what's blighted to someone is not blighted to someone else, right? I know that there are definitely standards, but things like shorter ceilings and, weird flow through rooms is a little off for me. And so I would love for us to rethink about that and the aspect of people who want to sell to us versus the open market. I think that one in particular really disturbs me. I don't know a better word, but that we would take something off the market just to help a homeowner. I think like the open market right now, as it stands, right, is doing fine. Maybe there was a place for that in the past, and probably, but I think as of right now, that is one that I would definitely like to relook at, that we don't do that. I think the open market should be able to take care of it, especially given the housing market as it is right now. I love the land trust and habitat, and I totally hear you that it's a lot of work and we need to add a lot more to do more of that. So I understand that, but I want to make sure that if we are going to morph this program, that we keep that part intact, right? That we continue to do that piece of it. And then when I think about like the 4 criteria, I think where I do see a place is, like you said, the ADU, the duplexes, or other non-traditional things like energy efficiency. I would want us to look at like extreme energy efficiency, right? It's like net zero, not kind of everybody should be working towards energy efficiency. And so I would want it to be above and beyond at a certain measure than what we have today for us to do that. Same thing with like the extra features, right? So like the ADUs and duplexes, I want to be able to promote more, but like what else? What else would we add to that list? That would be, we're putting our money where we want to see Richfield grow and kind of be that test sample set for. So let's think about like, instead of Richfield Rediscovered, is this program Richfield Reimagined, right? And like what we name it or call it, and kind of rethink about some of those things. That's my random thought list.
Thank you.
Any additional?
Yeah, here, I just see that you said 151 homes, and the reason I would want to move away from the RR program is I don't see them being made accessible, or the accessibility actually coming up in any of them, where I think we could go with the affordability, move it towards that, and maybe address that a little bit more.
So to follow up on that, you know, in the section where it had the recommendations about like duplexes or ADUs, would you like to add that as one of the criteria to
As a
really,
criteria, yes.
to have something that's going to be very accessible?
Yes.
To follow up also on Commissioner Vrees-Daniels' statement about the energy efficiency, one of the things that I have been reading about is there are some parts of the world where they're trying to get away from having homes that are heated with fossil fuel and trying to go more towards geothermal things, or other ways of heating their homes. And I know there's some of that referred to in our climate plan for the city. So when you're talking about the energy efficiency, could that also be like, I think in the last Richfield Rediscovered that we just approved, they were going to put in the geothermal. And so I'm just wondering, is that included in some of those recommendations that we'd be looking at trying to get away from the fossil fuels?
So we can, we have currently some requirements in there for energy efficiency, which we increased maybe a year or so ago or 2 years ago, but we certainly could revisit that. Our housing specialists work closely with Rachel, our sustainability specialists, and so they've worked together to develop some tougher standards. And what we like to see, we like to look to the programs that are out there, whether it's LEED or LEED is a fairly complicated program, but there are other standards out there, and we like to look to those and use those rather than try to create our own and try to monitor that for one house a year. That's way too much. We don't have the staff capacity for that. So we look to other standards, but they did increase that. What we ended up doing, I believe, is created a menu of, pick and choose, sort of like what he talked about. So you could do solar, or you could do this or that. And then we also addressed landscape standards, but we can certainly bring those back to you and show you again what we'd come up with and offer some stricter options as well.
Okay. I would say it was very enlightening for me when I looked at this section about the cost of the programs, of how much, each program averages with the subsidies and some of that, because I know that was a question that has come up with people asking about how our programs work. So that was very helpful to have that. So thank you. I have a source of funds question. With the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, is that restricted on what it can be used for? Like, can you do apartment remodeling out of the funds that we transfer into the affordable housing? Because it seems to me there was like a stricture on that.
That is an option. That the restrictions that normally trust funds can do, but that the special legislation limits, is rent assistance and down payment assistance.
Okay.
That was disappointing, but so we're kind of restricted to capital costs. We could do apartment remodeling. And we could certainly throw that out there. The issue is they will have to do income compliance, the owners, and then we have to monitor that. Right now, we're probably at staff capacity monitoring the inclusionary housing policy and the apartments, so we would have to probably pay for that kind of compliance. I don't know how many takers we'll get. I haven't been able to use this year's money even without income restrictions. So I finally got an application for the first time this year from someone who owns a single-family rental. So that's been a challenge to get folks to use it. I think if we add income compliance, I don't know what we'll get. But so it is an option. I'm just not sure what kind of success we'll have. We could certainly give it a try.
Okay, so I think I was confusing the rental assistance with the apartment.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So that makes sense. But you're saying that we're not getting,
It's hard to get the money used, and right now, part of the issue could just be supply chain, and, the pandemic made it complicated to go into people's units and do remodeling, right? And so that was complicated. So, we need to do, and we're short-staffed, as you know, and so to do that active, go out there and really, talk with owners and really encourage, we just don't have that capacity right now. We throw it out there as often as we can and then wait to have someone take us up on it. But at this point, we don't income restrict. We do ask for what they charge for rent and wouldn't necessarily give it to a building that had higher rents. My thought is NOAA properties, there's just a limit to what they can charge regardless. But so that's the philosophy we're going under so far. And but we could make that change and put more money into the program. I just don't know if it'd get used.
well, that's a significant thing of, I don't want to have something just sitting there and not being used.
Where I can see it being an opportunity is if someone came to us and said, we want to do a major redo, and then we could maybe provide some money to help restrict some of the units. That might be an option. Probably have to be a bigger owner who has the capacity to do income compliance.
Okay. And let's see. So the Richfield Rediscovered is coming out of the Housing Redevelopment Fund because it's dealing with the blighted so we can use that money. What happens to that money if we don't use the money by the time the TIF districts end? Is that lost to us? We can't use it for affordable housing anymore because it goes back to the county?
Correct, it will go back to the county. And so the city will get a small portion of its share through the increased tax base. So it's not a total loss. This is, we lose the opportunity to keep it all here in the community and reinvest.
So
Yeah, and we're not sure at this point. Hopefully we'll have a better sense of what amount that might be. But then, properties come up like World of Fish and others. That was a nice chunk of money that we could use out from there. So it's possible we might get there.
Okay, because I was in my mind trying to figure out how it all fit together so that we could use the resources to the maximum amount to help the community in the best way that we could.
Yep.
But I also understand making sure that you have some flexibility to, if an opportunity comes up, that you can meet it. Are there other discussion items? Go ahead.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. With the things I'm thinking about, I don't want to make this so restrictive that nobody applies for it or it's a ton of work, right? But I also, the other hand, don't want people to be applying something thinking it's guaranteed. So how can we reword it or think about it as like, this is what we would like it to be. These aren't necessarily tied to restrictions, but we'll give preference to those kind of things. And even if we don't have anything, and if it doesn't fit these criteria, we may say no. You know what I mean? I would hate, as I think about like the past ones, like for home where we've given them this program, they show up in a meeting and we say no, it's kind of, devastating as they were kind of like planning to do something, right? And so I don't want someone to get to the point and then be surprised, right, at the eventual piece. So how do we foster that language so that it makes sense?
I just want to add that it is important, just like having a zoning code, it is important to be clear about what you're looking for because there is a lot of initial investment that those applicants are making in this before they get to you. So just like a homeowner who's applying for a building permit or a variance or something, they want to be able to, at a staff level, clearly understand what you're looking for, that you could still absolutely say no. But it is good to lay that out.
Yeah.
So you have a series of recommendations here. Do you want us to comment on those specific recommendations?
Sure, I think that would be helpful.
So the one that I like is having some number 3, where you would add the requirement to the guidelines to include some kind of extra feature. And we can expand that list, but it mentions here accessory dwelling units, accessibility, energy efficiency, duplexes, and those type of things. I think that would be something that would be a good way to the word lab is not the right word, but kind of like a way to test out some of these new ideas. Other thoughts?
I agree with that. Number 3 feels like a good thing to add with those additions. I would say number 2, as I mentioned, where the owner seeks out the HRA and is willing to accept a modded price, I'm not interested in that anymore. I'm not interested in us seeking that out if it also doesn't do the rest. I'm not interested in us buying up lots and holding on to them in that way.
Any other thoughts?
Can I ask a clarifying question? So if there was a requirement in place that the way that we would redevelop a lot is only if it can meet one of these kind of extra items. So if someone approached us and said, for X, Y, Z reasons, I don't want to deal with the market. I would rather give you my home. or not give you my home, but sell my home to you. It is easier for me. And then we, as the HRA, are only going to develop it with someone who is then going to meet one of these additional goals. Is that okay? Or you just are not interested in the HRA purchasing properties from people who only want to deal with us because they do?
Great clarifying. I would say, like, if we have someone to develop number 3 ready to go at that same time, I would be open to that, right? If we have something that we want to do and we're ready to go, or I know that kind of doesn't maybe work out always that way. But what I really don't want to do is taking off affordable housing off of the market for someone who would be willing to sell at a modest price to us for us to hold on to. It just feels like we're doing a disservice to the market in whole when we are taking affordable housing off of the market and sitting on it and tearing it down.
You know, I would point out that what we could do is only do those affordably. There's no guarantee if it stays on the market that it's going to stay affordable. Unfortunately, what we often see is lipstick on a pig by a flipper, and it becomes not affordable, and they put money into a house that just shouldn't have money put into it, in our opinion. So if we were to have some of those opportunities, if we made sure it was affordable, I mean, that would be another option, just throwing that out there. There's some properties that we've missed out on, and it's just a shame because we see what happens and then someone buys what will continue to be a problem property, but it looks pretty.
How does the truth in housing aspect, though, not find those compliance issues, right? Because we have a really great truth in housing program, I would say, in Richfield. It's one of the most stringent in any of the other cities I've seen, which is fantastic, right? Where you have the list, you have to bring things up to code, and either the seller has to do it or the homeowner has to put money into escrow to fix it before they buy it, right? And I think that's fantastic. And so I'm wondering, like, how that doesn't cover these houses that, you say continue to be a problem?
Well,
like, yeah.
the point of sale covers health and safety issues, really. I'm trying to think of some examples. I mean, the far back of the lot, the one with a 1 foot setback, it's like, well, I mean, I guess, that's not the worst thing in the world, but they don't meet fire code. There's nothing you can do to fix that, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's a judgment call, I guess, if you don't feel like that those are problematic. There aren't a lot of those left, and there's one we missed out on. And I drive by and think, ugh. I really wish they hadn't put lipstick on that pig, but maybe that's a choice. I mean, one of them we picked up a few years ago, right, was 5 feet off the front property line, and it just seemed problematic to us. But yeah, maybe that's a bias we have, and it's not enough of a reason. I guess you can think about that.
I guess I don't want to limit it so much that we don't have any flexibility, but I do think the priority should be on using the funds for affordability. And the current thing where we're doing like 2 lots a year, I can live with that. And I guess that would be the recommendation that you're putting forward here, so that if there's a substandard home, that we'd have the funds available, but not to be out actively seeking and looking for that type of things. I think this should be one of our lower priorities, I guess is what I'm saying. That we have a lot of other things that we need to be spending money on, but I don't want to totally eliminate any flexibility. So if we know that it's not going to be like a high priority and we're not going to be out there pushing for it, to me, I would be fine with following the recommendations that you've given here. And I do think it's a good way to do like duplexes and some of those type of things. Other items that people want to talk about with that?
Yeah, with the accessibility issue, make sure that is a criteria. That would be my addition to it.
Can I just clarify with you, too, universal design is something else that's out there that I can see us being able to require that, and maybe accessibility is something we strongly encourage or is an option, and I don't know how you would feel about that, but universal design, meaning sort of setting it up for aging in place, and there's certain, width of doorways and, trying to make sure it's designed in such a way that it can be made accessible someday if needed. Is that something you'd be interested in, or
Yes.
are you looking for full accessibility?
Well, I mean, ideally, it'd be fully accessible, but if they can approach it with universal, that's a start.
I mean, we have done accessible homes in the past, I think maybe, but just 2 or 3 probably.
Yeah.
They're often, they've been most successful when there's somebody who comes with that desire, or that's how we've done it in the past, but we can certainly, push more, push harder.
Thank you.
So the question for staff then is there anything you need further clarification on or feedback from us?
Chair Supple, I do believe Commissioner Regan Gonzalez submitted some comments to be read. Did you receive those?
I did not, I haven't, I was at another meeting before this at the community center, so I haven't checked my email since about 4 o'clock.
Let me find them for you.
Okay, that would probably be good to share that, I'm sorry.
Okay. Let's see. Do you want me to read them? Or would you rather read them?
I could pull up my email, otherwise if you have comments, I just didn't know they were there, so go ahead if you'd like to read them.
I got them right here. Thank you to HRA Chair Supple for reading my comments in my absence tonight relating to HRA Agenda Item Number 4, the review and discussion regarding the Richfield Rediscovered program. Thank you to both the council members who submitted comments on the program and to our staff who took the time to prepare additional information and context for tonight's HRA discussion on the program. I think revisiting the initial intent, focus, and impact of our programs over the years is both an important and great practice for the HRA and the city more broadly to ensure we are meeting our goals and making the impact intended. After reviewing the packet materials on the item, I am in full support of the staff recommendation to strategically focus the program while continuing our focus on affordability. Staff recommendations provide a good balance of continuing to provide opportunities for housing diversity and opportunities to innovate through Richfield Rediscovered, while also increasing our focus on deeply affordable housing through various HRA and city programs. Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you, and thank you for telling me about that was there, because I had missed that email, so. All right, that's, any other feedback or clarifications that you need?
Can I ask just a super broad question? Don't mean to open a can of worms, but if we were to completely eliminate this program, what would we fund?
Well, these are redevelopment pooled TIF, so it can go to pick up other blighted or correct other blight in the community, things like World of Fish, properties like 6501 Penn. If you've spent any time kind of watching the HRA over the years, you know that those opportunities are kind of few and far between, so it can be tricky. On the other hand, we also we've committed $500,000 to the enclave development to help correct blight at that site and maintain the commercial business on the ground floor. So we could look for opportunities to help other projects that are correcting blight throughout the community. You know, the hub might be an opportunity, things like that. But we have had trouble over the years, just to be upfront. It has been a challenge to find good uses.
Okay. That was my question. Like, is there existing programs that we would just fund more with this money, or would you have to look for other opportunities? Like, could we, I'm looking at because of the type of TIF it is, right?
Right.
That's what I'm like, I know we talked about like apartment remodeling, but could we like expand Kids at Home and work through like a longer list?
Kids at Home is funded by the EDA.
Okay.
So
I see that. Yes. I forget they.
Other
Did they move
things
back?
that, you know, one of the reasons we went to the legislature to move some of the funds to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was because we have this pot of money that we're having trouble spending.
Okay. That's helpful.
So the Richfield Rediscovered could be taken out of that pot of money.
Right, and currently we've budgeted $200,000, so it's not a ton of money right now, right?
All right, any other discussion on that one? And then we've taken into account the emailed feedback and the feedback we've had tonight. Is there anything else you need from us on that?
Good idea. Okay, just to summarize what I've heard, yes, is that item number 3 is what you're most interested in, the idea that we could use these funds to promote other goals of the HRA, including accessibility, ADUs, all the things that are listed, and perhaps new things that we may come up with, right? And so that was something that there was pretty consistent desire for. What I'm hearing in number 2, people are less interested in those kinds of properties. I didn't hear a whole lot of discussion about 1, but I assume that problematic properties are still something that we see a role for the HRA. And at least I heard from some of you that giving us some flexibility if we need to do market rate for some of these properties, that gives us some flexibility to accomplish, 3, and as well as alleviating the blight. So what I'm thinking we'll come back with is some proposed changes to the program, probably all 3 programs, the lot sale, the credit program, as well as the new home program, saying these are our priorities and we're going to strengthen those. I also heard we want to be sure that we're requiring above and beyond for energy efficiency, for design, for the different things. Did I miss anything?
All right, thank you. Are there other discussion items on different topics that anybody wants to bring up? I have a request for a future meeting, and it doesn't have to be like next month. It could be down the road. I'm a member of the 494 Corridor Commission, and when they're giving their reports, they often talk about things they're doing with other cities, and I believe there's some of them where they're working with the HRAs in other cities. So I'm just curious if they've ever approached us or if we've ever thought of working with them. And I believe it had to do with commuting and transit and that type of things, so that they were trying to show people that if you're living in this area, these are all your transit options. So I was just intrigued by the idea of that we could do some sort of a partnership, but I don't expect anybody to answer me right off the bat, and I could do some more research as well as what they're doing in other cities. But I just want to throw that out there for down the road.
Sure, I have not heard that, but yes, I would be interested in hearing what they're doing. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Any other topics for the discussion items? All right, then we'll move on to the executive director's report.
Thank you. I just have a couple of updates tonight. First, speaking of 6501 Penn, we're expecting demo to start mid to end of July, and for that to be down in time for Penn Fest. So that'll be good for everyone over there, the neighbors included. We're getting ready to sign agreements with Better Futures to do the deconstruction of 6326 14th Avenue. And I believe we've at least briefly touched on Better Futures here. Deconstruction is an alternative to demolition, where you seek to reuse and recycle the majority of the materials in a home. The costs of this are entirely covered by a grant from Hennepin County, so it will be no cost to the HRA. The part that will be a small cost to the HRA is removal of the foundation and any of the shell of the building that can't be reused or recycled. So excited to sign those agreements and get that underway on 14th. And then finally, I assume you have probably heard, but our housing specialist, Kate Aitchison, has been promoted, and she is the city's new communications and engagement manager. So we have an opening on our housing team. The position has been open for 3 weeks now. It actually closes tonight at midnight, but it's a job share position, working with Julie and our other housing specialist, Les McDermott. And so if you know anyone, there are still a few hours left to apply for that job. And that's it.
Thank you. And I know you guys have been doing a lot of hiring, so I appreciate all the work on that. All right, so next we're going to move on to claims.
So moved?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve the claims. Are there any items for discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the claims. Seeing that we have no further business, thank you all, and we stand adjourned.